BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. Welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, well, bullshit. I'm your host, Trae Dorn, and it is October. It is our annual Samhain Halloween spooky episode where we get real spooky. And this episode is going to be a little different than the last two because we've been doing real ghost stories for a while, and we're going to still tell some real ghost stories today. But and that's what I intended when I brought this month's guests on, Lee Bradford, when they came on. But that's not exactly what happened when we started recording. When we started recording, what ended up happening is we ended up talking about like how legends and stories actually develop, and we ended up talking about like how these like legends about cryptids and legends about spirits and things like that, like how they actually happen. And I think it became a much more interesting discussion than that, because we could have just done another year of talking about ghost stories, and we've done that. I did it with Lee once. I did it with Bree Nagarin another year, and I did it with Bree and a bunch of people from around the Nerd and Tie network last year. So I feel like a fourth year of that exact same episode, not exactly as much fun as talking about this. So I hope that you enjoy the resulting chaotic conversation that is going to follow for like the next chunk of your life. Joining me now is Lee Bradford, creator of the Sweeney Tarot and author of Good Clean Dirt. See, I threw in another plug in there without warning you. Welcome back to the show, Lee. It has been 3 years exactly since you were last here.
And so much has changed.
And and I think the last time you were here was the first spooky episode we ever did on this show. So that makes so you're back for round 4, I guess, having skipped rounds 2 and 3.
Yep. Yeah, that's me. I skipped a grade 2. And we're back after a word from our sponsors.
I don't do advertising. It's the whole point of the Patreon. I'll do, and you said that. That's too funny. So now there won't be a clean edit, folks. There was an edit, and you don't know what happened. It was mysterious, and that early in an interview. That's amazing. All right. We're just starting out to a smooth start here. It's we're talking about spooky stuff because it's October. The October episode. It is. When does this episode come out? It's I'm so like usually on this show I'm like super prepared and like have done all this research, and then I'm just always like the most disorganized ever for these October episodes. So if you're on Patreon, it's like October 22nd or 23rd, depending on when I get the edit done. And if you're listening to this and you're a normal person, it's October 30th, and tomorrow is Halloween or Samhain or, Spooky Day, depending on whatever you choose to celebrate. That made sense, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you covered most of the bases. Unless you want to do like Muertos as well, but I mean... There's a lot.
I definitely so I can say the name of that and mention when it is, but I should not be talking about that topic more than that because I don't know crap about it, and I don't know. I think there's enough white people talking about cultural holidays they know nothing about on the internet.
I'm gonna leave that to somebody who actually does more with that holiday than
or at least has read the Wikipedia page, because I last learned about that in 7th grade and have learned nothing more since then. So I'm gonna just
yep. I'm good.
I know just enough to know that I don't know enough to talk about it.
That's a good place to be. There's plenty of other things to talk about.
and before anyone jumps on me, I'm not saying a white person couldn't talk about it. I'm saying that this white person shouldn't talk about it. Let's be very clear. I'm talking about me and not a general statement about everybody. But if you don't,
Nor I.
yeah, if you don't know anything about something, though, maybe don't speak about it like an authority on the internet. But that's a different episode of this podcast. We're talking about ghosts. And while I'm sure there are plenty of racist ghosts out there, I don't have the rest of that sentence. There's just probably a lot of racist ghosts out there.
Well, there are lots of racist ghosts, and if you go to any of the like the ghost walks or ghost tours around the Midwest, I'm sure you'll meet a lot of them, and you'll also meet a lot of racists that are not ghosts. But that's also another episode of this show.
Well, actually, that gets me thinking about something, and I can actually segue out of this into the actual topic. Is, do you ever Okay, so the reason why, of course, we talk about ghosts every October is, one, it's seasonal and fun. Two, every witch I've ever met in my life has at least an interest in ghosts, even if they don't have their own ghost stories, likes to hear about them. So that's why we do this. But one of the interesting things that I've always found is so ghost tours often focus on very aesthetically spooky places that look like they should be haunted. But in my experience, that there are a lot of the places that I've found in real life that are actually haunted are the places that don't look like they should be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right now, my job requires me to go to a lot of different schools around my city and actually outside of my city as well. And probably one of the most haunted feeling places I've been in is I believe it was an elementary school, and it wasn't even the auditorium or the theater area, which likely should be haunted. It was just this little hallway where the bathrooms were, and the ceiling was lower than the rest and it had this little dip down, and I got this just spooky feeling in there. So that place, definitely haunted. Auditorium, not at all. But all of these, I've been on a couple ghost tours, and they'll tell you all it's really an excuse to explain things about history. The reason I like going on them is not necessarily because I want to see or meet or be scared by a ghost. It's because I like the interesting characters who get really passionate about their town's history.
Yeah.
And will expound entire the whole unknown history about things in your town you never would have thought of, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those are great people to talk to. They're just so excited.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. But what's never going to be on a ghost tour is I've mentioned this literally every year we've done this episode, the house I used to live in that was haunted, which is a mid-century duplex that's the only place I've ever lived that was haunted, and it was built in the mid 20th century and renovated in the 90s. That was the most 90s basement ever, with this glass block bar in the basement. It was a great place to live when you're 20, but apparently it was a great place for that ghost to hang out too. If you want to know if listeners want to know the ghost stories from that place, you can just go listen to previous episodes. I'm not going to rehash that, but also parks. I have had personal ghost experiences in 2 different parks. And I've talked about one of them, Owen Park, which is this park. It's in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Owen Park near the band show, the wood, there's a bunch of trees there. It's not really woods even, it's a park. But there's a bunch of trees there, and I've had a couple of different weird experiences there, including hearing a distinctive voice in my ear, someone whispering an inch away from my left ear, which was weird as hell. But there's this park, Grover Neighborhood Park, not too far from where I currently live, and it connects to the Eau Claire soccer park. So it's and I mean, first off, I always feel like I'm being watched in that park, but mostly that's probably just all the deer, because there are a lot of deer in my neighborhood. But
Trae, I think you have a problem.
Yeah, it's called I moved back to where there are a bunch of deer. Deer were not a problem when I lived in Indiana. It's but I'm like literally like I always kind of felt spooky at this like one spot in the park, and then one day like I'm walking through because I walk through the park at night because I'm 6'3" and 300 pounds, and people mistake me for a dude, so I can go walk through an unlit park at night. The world is awful, but anyways, but I always felt like this like kind of spooky like this weird presence at this one part of the park, and I dismissed it as like my own imagination until one day walking through like I felt something tug on my shirt.
Holy shit.
Like grab my shirt and pull it, and I'm like in the middle of the path, like there's like nothing physically near me. And to which I just like at this point like have ever lived with ghosts and like had spent like, and while like this was just like last year and it was like my first experience with a ghost in like a decade, and I was super annoyed, and I was just, my response was just like, no, leave me alone.
Can you not?
I'm like, I'm not like, because this was like at like kid height. Like it was the bottom part of my shirt. So it was the part that like a child would tug at, like my niece or my nephew would.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I should say the niece and nephew on my side of the family, not my other niece and nephew, because I have a niece and nephew in elementary school. I also have a niece in college and a nephew in high school. So those two wouldn't tug my shirt.
Right.
But the elementary school ones, it's a vast difference between those. But like, yeah, it's, and like, so I've had these like really clear like experiences that, because I always like with ghosts, like I'm a very analytical person. I try to dismiss, and like I always try to explain everything away before I conclude that it's actually like a ghost of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those happened in parks, like in like big public parks that in the middle of the day will have a ton of people in them. But apparently there's other stuff there.
Yeah, and you don't see it when there's like people there. When like the reason why that school felt haunted to me was because there's usually supposed to be people there, but it was after hours, and I was doing like the virtual school photos, so there was no one in that hallway, and it's like it was expecting there to be people there, and there wasn't, and that's one of the reasons why schools feel haunted so much.
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
Malls, like dead malls, empty malls are like just peak haunted to me, because for 20 years it was the place to be, and suddenly they're empty and there's no one there except for like 5 different nail places, and mathematically a church.
so what's even eerie is when those places are not disused. So like in the 90s I used to be a part of this. I'm a geek. I used to be a part of, I'm a geek, but the listeners might not. Starfleet Academy was a Star Trek fan group in Milwaukee, Starfleet Academy in Milwaukee. And we met in a room, for a long time we met in a room in the basement of Mayfair Mall, which is, it's one of the, it's a mall that's still very active in Milwaukee right now. So it's one of these surviving malls. It's technically in Wauwatosa, which is the suburb I grew up in. But we met in a room in the basement, but we would meet on like a Sunday night, and so like the mall would close while we were down there.
Oh, dude. Wow.
And so we would come upstairs after the meeting. And well, first off, there's all these offices and like meeting rooms in the basement of that mall, which is just a strange experience to go down there, because like you go from like commercial like flashing lights, all the thing, to like just like bland beige walls and bland carpets, and it's an eerie thing to come out to go down there to begin with. But I didn't drive at the time. My parents would come pick me up afterwards. I was a teenager. I was a child. Leave me alone. Again, I'm yelling at the listeners, not you. But I would go up there. It's like I'd have to wait in the mall for my ride because I had to be able to see the road. And so like, or sometimes like we'd be like talking with like someone else at the meeting, and like, afterwards upstairs. And like, yeah, this is a meeting that's full of adults, and I'm like a 16-year-old going to these things. That's how I ended up working conventions, was through this. Everyone assumed I was over 18. I was not. Because that's like when you're 6'3" and have a big vocabulary. In geek spaces, everyone assumes you're older because social awkwardness is not a cue that sets off an alert that this person might be young.
No, because that's everybody's base.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. Everybody has that.
Yeah. So, but I did, but like just standing in the middle of the atrium of that mall when it's closed. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like
was it like a food court as well?
No, the food court was upstairs. Like this is a big mall. Relatively, like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was quite as big then. It might have been before the expansion. But yeah, it was just eerie being in that space when like everything's dark, and like it's like, and that atrium is like multiple stories tall with like skylights, and like it's a huge like area, like just vertically. Because like it's open to like the second floor goes around that atrium, like it's not closed off, and then like there's almost like a tower of glass above it, because there are offices up there too. But then like it's just a huge space, and it's just like eerie as heck. I genuinely kind of love buildings like that when they're empty. Like empty academic buildings are my favorite. Like
there's such an energy there, and like you can feel it. It's so thick in the air. I love it. There's especially because I grew up like just a hop and skip over from Notre Dame, the college, not the church. I lived right there, and we would go over there when school was not in session, and it was just like everything felt so big and yet so intimate, and it's just like there's supposed to be people here and they're supposed to be learning, but it's empty. And it was just a completely different energy from anywhere else I've ever been. And I was like, I loved doing that. Like for a summer I was living with my parents, and I would just go over to the library to learn, just to read. Because they have if you are ever at Notre Dame, this is the hot tip to any witch. If you are ever over at Notre Dame and you go to the Hesburgh Library, that's the one with the gigantic touchdown Jesus in the front. If you go up to, I think it is the 13th floor, that is their religious studies section, and Father Hesburgh had a philosophy, rest his soul, that he did not want any book ever to be out of print or burned or destroyed. So there's plenty of books on witchcraft in that library, in the most Catholic school of America.
I love it.
Because Father Hesburgh is dope. Yeah. So but like going there during the summer when there was no one there, it was just like you can feel it. It is so cool.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, it's when I lived in when I was in college in at UW Eau Claire, this is a long time ago. The campus was very different back then than it is now. Like they've torn down half the buildings and built new ones. But the dorm I lived in, which is eventually going to get demolished in the next few years, it's still there right now. But I used to work when I worked for housing when I was in college, where I was the judicial board chair for housing, and what that meant is that I ran hearings for people in housing who broke the rules. But I was the head of the board, and it was an all student board. Like we all had to be residents, but it meant I got paid the same as an RA to work 3 hours a week. It was best job I've ever had in my life. Free room and board, so free place to stay, free food, and you got to work, and you get a small stipend of cash, and you just got to work 3 hours a week. I would
take that in a heartbeat.
I would do that now. Don't get me wrong. I like being able to have new things and new shiny things, but if I never had to worry about housing or food for 3 hours of work a week, oh my God. Anyways, what that meant though is that I had to help with the RA training, because I was part of the board that wrote the updates to the judicial code at the time, and I looked it up. Some of the stuff I wrote is still in there, including exact verbiage that, look, I know that it's weird to be proud of coming up with the phrase designated kitchen area, like 15 years later. But when I looked up the code and they're still using that exact sentence I wrote, and I'm like, I did that. I'm making someone's life a pain in the ass right now.
This is your legacy.
Well, there was a rule against like any sort of like hot plate or any sort of like kitchen appliance that heated things up in the rules to be in a dorm room, except then they built apartment style dorms and literally they installed an oven and stove that violated the rules. the thing itself. Yeah. So we had to write all the exception policy. So, but anyways, long story short, because I had to come up for the RA training, I would have to come up like 2 weeks before the semester started every year to do like 2 hours of their training. Okay. And so for 2 weeks, I would be sitting up there just on a campus where the only people on campus were the RAs and nothing else. Because like summer and me, and because summer session had ended. And so I just had 2 weeks to kill on an empty college campus. And I lived in like, the dorm I lived in most of the dorms are separated from the main campus. Like they're either up a hill or now they've got one like across the river. But like there were two that were on the main lower campus. And that was the one I lived in. And so like I'm in the middle of like all the academic buildings. And just like alone for like 2 weeks.
Just all of that energy squishes you.
Oh, I love it so much.
You're right in the middle of it.
Like there's something like so weird on like a warm summer night, like standing in the middle of like the campus mall, just like you hear the air conditioners come on for like two of the academic buildings, and like it's just like this gentle white noise as like you're in the middle of this giant open space and there's nothing else.
And you can hear everything going on.
Yeah.
And you're not even in the building. Yeah. You're just there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was going to school at Ball State, after the when I was out of the dorms, we'd still be renting a house, and I would still go to campus for functions and things, and it'd just be so empty. And it was just, it's a hell of a feeling to be one of the few people in a vast open space that normally houses thousands and thousands, because Ball State's a pretty big campus. So I totally understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah. It's and to actually bring it about ghosts, the dorm I lived in was super haunted.
Oh, so, of course.
Yeah, like literally like had something I like had something show up in my dorm room one night. And like clear visage of a person and like near because I only warded like half of my dorm room for some reason at the time. Because that's how I set up my wards at the time, and I changed them after this. But there was a section of my dorm that wasn't warded, and then just suddenly there one night, in the middle of the night, it looked like there was a person standing there. Like a clear outline, and I was like, get the fuck... Except it, like, as I turned the light on, it was not there. And...
I have a question about that, actually.
Okay.
Did they look like a man in a tall black hat?
No.
Okay, because then, I've heard more than one person talk about the man in the tall black hat, like a top hat, and they peer into your windows.
I've heard that, and I am critical.
I'm critical of everything, pretty much.
First off, I'm like, a hat is a really common accessory for a lot of time periods. Like, it's like, oh, they're all the same thing. I'm like, really? Are they the same thing? Or have we just met 10 different ghosts from the 1940s?
Well, yeah. I mean, it could be that. It's just, I've heard it's such a weird common denominator to me Like, it could be that they are a specific kind of ghost that does a specific kind of behavior. Like, because I was talking with my coworker, Lexi. She says
Yeah.
that she's been followed by this specific tall man in a tall black hat before, and just she moves around a lot. So for it to be the same kind of ghost in multiple places is kind of weird. But if it's like the same, like if they all exhibit the same behavior, just kind of like peering into your windows or watching you or something like that, if all they do is watch, maybe it's not necessarily a ghost, but something ghost-like. So that's one of the things that's been on my mind.
Well, it's, I've always been critical as to whether or not most things that we experience are actual, like, spirits of people. Or whether or not there's some other kind of thing. And, like, there are things that I've referred to as shadows just because it's something that I've seen that looks like the shadow of of a person. Like, but, like, standing three-dimensionally in the room, but, like, just a darker figure. And I've encountered more than one thing that I would describe as that. None of them had hats on, but here's, I do think that there is a level of the power of suggestion where we hear about shadowy figure, like a shadowy figure wearing a hat. And if you see a shadowy figure, are you really going to remember clearly whether or not it had a hat? Or is the suggestion of, I see a shadowy figure, like, I'm not trying to discount anybody's experiences. Like, I'm saying that maybe you did see a thing. Are you sure it was wearing the hat? Or did you see something that matched the description of the thing with the hat, other than the hat, and your brain filled in a hat? Because we're still talking about something that doesn't necessarily have a distinctive, like, clear-cut outline. You know what I mean? It's...
Right.
Like, the very essence of what it is kind of out of focus. So... I think that I think it's like to a degree like the gray alien thing. Like there's like the cover of the book Communion. I think it's the name of the book, but it starts with C. Like suddenly sightings of gray aliens went up after that book came out. So
yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but in this instance, I've had two unrelated people refer to the man in the black hat. So I'm like, kind of like, this is a thing, obviously, that I have never personally experienced, but it's something kind of like, well, if it's common enough, it's probably not what we think it is. Because
it's one of the things that I've encountered really matches the description of the man in the black hat, but it didn't have a hat. So it was that's why I go like, that's really the only reason why I'm just like, I'm not being critical of the stories. I do sometimes think that maybe there's a detail that's been added because of the power of suggestion. But that's just me.
I can talk. My problem is orbs. Like, I understand.
Orbs, though.
It's dust.
Bugs.
Speaking as a photographer, hey, so I joined an urban exploration group on Facebook. I don't have the courage to do it myself because I don't want to fall through somebody's floor and break my leg and die. But it's fun to watch other more experienced people do it. But a lot of them are also really into ghost hunting, and it's very, very frustrating to me because they'll be like, it was a cloudy day and there was no dust and no snow and no rain. So what is this thing on my what is this white blob in the middle? And it's like, it's condensation on your lens, because it is right there where condensation would be. It's on that little bulb. And the word we're looking for is backscatter. Backscatter is caused by there being dust in the atmosphere, and if you are using your flash that's native to your camera is going to flash forward, and it's going to illuminate anything that is in the foreground.
Yep.
That's how you get orbs. The way you reduce backscatter is you have an external and you point it upwards, and also it improves your pictures, but that's a whole different conversation to have.
Well, look, there are people today ghost hunting who don't understand video compression, so like that's a whole other can of worms.
There was one that I kept it had like a million notes on Facebook, and it drove me nuts. Does anybody see the black figure in the window? It looks like they're wearing a graduation cap. And I'm like, that is where the wallpaper is peeling off of the wall. You can see in the photo where it's peeling off. But go on with your bad self.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's
people want to find patterns where they find them, and I totally understand. Like you being skeptical about stories, because I am skeptical too.
we're designed to find patterns. That's what our brains are designed to do. We're designed to find patterns out of chaos. Like I literally just like, this is literally a thing that happened. Is it occurred to me that like a bag that's hanging on the other side of my office, that where the strap connects to the bag, it kind of looks like a face. Like like, oh, there are the eyes, there are the nose, there are the mouth. Like my brain immediately filled that in.
I do that with cars.
Oh, everyone does that with cars.
Oh, that's an angry car. That's a happy car. This car has eyebrows. Why? Like, if you ever look at they design cars to look like that. Like, I've noticed that some of them have little mods to give them angry eyes so that they don't look so feminine.
You especially see that on Jeeps, like the Jeep grills with like the downward angry headlight modification. I'm like, there's some real insecurity there.
It's like my Jeep cannot have round uwu eyes.
God forbid your Jeep accidentally look a little too feminine.
No, this Jeep goes off-road. It doesn't. There's not a bit of mud on that thing.
Contrarily though, I will always love eyelashes on headlights.
Okay. I didn't hate them until I met this one girl that worked at the flower shop, and I did hate them.
Oh, okay.
I worked with the girl at the flower shop, and she's like one of the few people that I'm not consistently mad at. She's the one who breathes fire.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a performer, and her whole thing is fire dancing and then eating the fire at the end of the show. It's kind of amazing. But she's like the only person, in my opinion, who can pull off the eyelashes on once again the Kia Soul.
For listeners who don't have any idea why the Kia Soul is a once again thing, is before we started recording and kind of the warm up, we were talking about cars because I'm in the middle of buying a new one, and so should I put eyelashes on my truck?
I think you should.
I think you know what? Also, that's how I get murdered. I live in a rural area. I'm already like I end up in like, okay, so the town I live in, fairly progressive, and is a little dot of blue, but we're surrounded by a sea of red, and I spend a lot of weekends in like towns of less than 1,000 people. It would not be safe for me to do that on my truck.
Damn, because I was going to suggest you get the rainbow ones.
No, I am planning on getting my a sticker of my color outside the lines, like genderqueer pride thing that I made. I'm gonna put a sticker of that on the back, because no one who's not queer will get that is a abstract pride flag. But people who are queer will get that it's an abstract pride flag.
And that's about the signal. That's signaling to your
That's
people.
My shibboleth. That's my like, it's that yes, a truck is parked here, but it's a queer truck, so it's fine.
This is a safe truck. This truck is a safe place.
Yeah. I've seen enough Confederate flags in northern Wisconsin.
Ew.
Let that. Okay, so I literally live in a town where the Memorial High School's mascot is Old Abe, the eagle. Old Abe was an actual bald eagle that traveled with a group of soldiers from Wisconsin in the Civil War. Like, one of the symbols of pride for our town is that eagle was from here. Like,
so why are you
we killed the Confederates.
I don't understand the Confederate flags in the town that I live in, which is a very small subdivision. of Ohio of Columbus.
God, yeah, there are so many Confederate flags in Ohio.
Yeah, like we never, like the only little bit of our state that was in the Confederacy or even related is in the very south near Cincinnati. So seeing a Confederate flag up here in central Ohio is just very perplexing.
Well, I don't know if you know this, Lee, but there are these people called racists, and they really don't care about history. They care about something that gives them a sense of identity in a world that's crushed them, and they've been tricked to blame minorities.
Well, what they could do is they could pick up a book on how to knit, and they could learn to knit, and then they would have a hobby that isn't racism. But then they'd probably knit racist things.
I was going to say, Lee, the bad news is that there are I know for a fact there are plenty of racist people who knit.
Damn it. And to bring it back to the ghost stories.
Ghosts, yes.
Ghosts. To bring it back to ghost stories, I actually am staring at one of the books right now. We did a ghost tour in Irving, Indiana, which is a subdivision of Indianapolis, and the very, very interesting guy had this just book that is a compilation of very old newspaper clippings about ghost sightings and stories and things like that. He was a really interesting character. And there's a lot of houses that he claims used to be slave houses. Like there was a master house and there's a slave house. And it's like, I can kind of see that in Indiana. But like, they never actually tell you that. Like, they don't tell you that even though there wasn't, like, Indiana didn't try to secede or anything like that, but there was still slaves here. So, yeah. I mean... But, they always tell you, like, sometimes you can hear the chains rattling and things like that. And it's like,
chains, you say?
Chains, you say? Chains. Ooh. So, like, it's one of those, this is one of those things where I'm very, very skeptical because, like, while I do, here, like, I can understand why you would see. Sorry, if you heard something scrabbling on the floor, that's my cat.
So it's not a ghost. It's a cat.
It's not a ghost.
Okay.
It's my cat.
And it's a real cat, not a ghost cat.
Oh, not this time, no.
Okay.
Like, you can hear, like, you'll hear people make up things like, this is or they will say that this is the slave house, but it's like, I can't verify 100% that they didn't use chains, but I also can't verify that they used chains because it's more likely up here that they would have used rope. I mean, it just little regional things in your area when you're talking about ghost stories is, could this have feasibly happened and could it be proven?
Right.
And one of the problems that I keep running into is they want it to be a person so bad. When you talk about a ghost, you want it to be a specific person because that makes it very relatable, and they'll be like, oh, it's my great 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 so and so, or it's the former owner of this house, and it's like sometimes it's not a person, it's just like I'm on record as saying things like this house is haunted but not by a human ghost, and that sounds very enigmatic and crazy and scary, but like really that's normal. Like all of Ohio is like this. Something is haunting everything. It's just not a human all the time.
Well, I think a lot of the world is so. I talked about this. Actually, I talked about this last time you were on the show, 3 years ago. But like the high school theater that I grew up, like I was in when I was in high school, and the theater was haunted, and I saw and I have ghost stories about that. But there was this story about this guy, Fitzsimmons, and like this supposed person that was the ghost, and he there were these stories about he was a student there, and then he died there, and all this stuff. And when I dug into the records, in high school, being the curious person, I went to the local library because they literally had a yearbook for every year going back to the foundation. Like, they had every yearbook going for the history of the high school back to like the early 1900s, to when the building was constructed. And I looked through every single book, and I went through newspaper archives. Like, there is never a student with that name ever in the history of the high school ever. There was never a student who died in that part of the building that connected to any of the stories. As far as I could tell, no one ever died in the building, period. But like, or at least literally not a single detail of the story that had been passed around for years, like long before I got there. Like, none of the details of that story were true.
Yeah.
But there was a ghost.
I mean, I 100% believe that there was a ghost. I just don't think it was Fitzsimmons, who never existed.
Right.
Everybody wants, it's easier for us. I was having thinky thoughts about this, and we want it to be a human, or we want it to be a person, or we want it to be somebody that we know or could have feasibly known very badly, because that gives us both comfort and also relates us to our own fear of death.
Oh, absolutely.
And the way that we treat death, especially in, like, you know, America, especially in I don't know the rest of America, but at least in the Midwest, it's a very scary thing you don't talk about. So if there is like a ghost of a person, then and you can talk to that ghost as if it is that person, it can help you give closure to something that you may feel has, like, the time has passed for it. And that's great. That's legit.
Yeah.
That's probably probably something in therapy that you can do. But
well, and you know, it's when I saw that figure in my dorm room in like the mid 2000s, I was literally in the same building that a friend of mine had died in 3 or 4 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And for me in that moment, my first thought was, is this Sean? I dismissed.
Which is it's a very human thought to have when you encounter something spooky like that. Like, it could have been, or it could have been something of Sean.
Right. It's, like, I mean, literally thousands of people have lived in that building, if not tens of thousands of people. The building was like 80 years old at that point.
I have kind of I've had thoughts about how there can be a ghost of a person who's still alive. Like, if a person has changed so much, part of them is probably left in that dorm. Like, the part of them that lived in that dorm is still there, but they're probably a completely different person now. It could be a lot of things. It could be even something from outside of the world that's taking shelter. Because ghosts can be like cats like that, or raccoons. They eat your trash sometimes. They scratch up the walls.
Oh God, I hope a deeply closeted version of me is not still walking around that dorm.
Ew, no, thank you. I'm good. You put up wards, so...
That's true.
Maybe. I mean, it's... I feel like a tragic or traumatizing event might have caused that to be there, but I
was in an abusive relationship while living in that dorm. I dated someone where, like, there were all the red flags of abuse, but I didn't realize it until years later, because a lot of the emotional manipulation tactics that this person tried with me did not work. And it was years later reading a list of things that were like, these are emotional abuse tactics, that I was like, oh, all of that happened every day. That didn't, I'm just too weird and dense to pick up on the subtlety.
Well, I mean,
I'm too neurodivergent to have been abused in that situation. Shit.
We've had that conversation about toxic workplaces as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the frog situation.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot realize that you're in an abusive relationship with somebody, or
I mean, the parts where I got hit should have been a clue.
Should have been, actually, not. But it's different. It's I mean, you're not seeing it that way when you're in it.
yeah, also I'm a large person, and I put my foot down that was never to happen again, and that did never happen
Oh,
again. So,
okay. All
but
right.
I'm also 6'3", and at the time I was probably 250 pounds. I'm fatter than I used to be. Um,
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
tell that to my knees. Uh,
Oh,
that's yeah,
don't tell it to my niece. They already know.
yeah. That's a look. I don't mind being fat. In fact, actually, I like being fat in many ways because I stopped. Like, you know, I understand that as a masculine presenting person, I do not have it anywhere near as bad as femininely presenting people have always had it. But I used to get a lot of really unwanted comments and attention from women who were 20 years older than me,
Hmm.
in really gross, weird ways. Again, it was never people my own age where I might have liked it, but it was always people my mother's generation. Um,
Awkward.
yeah, and
Mm-mm.
it was really uncomfortable for many years of my life. But then I got fat and it stopped, and I was like, yes, I can
See,
go to
I
the
have
grocery
actually.
store in peace without a cashier the age of my mother putting her hand on top of mine and telling me how handsome she finds me.
That's super duper weird.
It's fucking gross.
Mm-mm. That's
Don't do
gross.
that.
No, thank you.
Don't do that to
No.
people. If you, ladies, I understand that like women have it far worse in this society, but maybe if there's a younger male presenting person who is in a social situation with you, don't just touch them. Don't do that.
No.
And don't make
No.
comments about their appearance unprompted. That's weird and uncomfortable for everyone, and that you can't recognize that is not good. Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't do it. Don't. I mean, I never had that problem. I had, I've always been kind of chubby. So I've never been like catcalled to an extent where I felt okay, I have been catcalled. That's incorrect.
Yeah.
Because the average person who catcalls will catcall to anyone. There was one day I was wearing a suit and a bow tie, and I was on a bicycle, and I was clearly on my way to someone, and this one guy was just catcalling me, and it's like, does that ever work? And he looks at me and says, yeah, and I'm like, great. Not today. Like, I could not have been more male presenting if I tried, because I'm sorry, that body shape it does not make itself look as male as I want to. But it's like, it's very clear I am busy.
Yeah.
I was wearing a suit. Why would you why do they do this? But I've always been I won't say I've been lucky.
To be fair,
I've
everyone
been
looks better in a suit.
Yeah, absolutely. I look excellent in a suit. That's me. Um, but I mean, I like the unwanted attention has always been very negative for me. So being on the other side of that has been kind of weird. So it's always, you should lose some weight, things like that. And I'm just like, emphatically, no, I should not. I'm just gonna stay fat and I'll be happy about it.
I don't know.
And just
The question is to, I don't know, if someone said that you should lose some weight to me as like a cat call or something like that, I think my response would be, why would it make me more appealing to you? And if they said yes, I would say that I'm going to gain weight and then keep walking.
Yeah.
Because that's all right. So ghosts.
Gross.
We're talking about ghosts. All right. So I live in rural Wisconsin, and so because I have used so many of my stories on the show, I'm gonna pull out from the archives a story that does not involve me, and it's just one of my favorite things because it's the most Wisconsin ghost story I can think of. Because first off, it happened. This is about a place in Vilas County, Wisconsin, which is Vilas County is up by the UP, up by the Upper Peninsula. So it's like right up there. It's actually where, like, it's a place up in Vilas County is where my family rents a cabin every year, and we go up there. We stay by Saint Germain, but this is up in Land O'Lakes, which is closer. It's further north, and it has been called one of Wisconsin's most haunted sites, and that is the Summerwind Mansion, or the Lamont Mansion, as it's known, and it sits on West Bay Lake in Vilas County in northeastern Wisconsin. And this is what the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel wrote about it. And this is a newspaper, and I'm just questioning how, I'm glad I don't subscribe to this paper anymore. But the state's most haunted site sits in the far northern reaches of Wisconsin. Summerwind Mansion was built first as a fishing lodge in the early 1900s and then remodeled in 1916 by Robert Lamont. Robert Lamont would actually go on to be like U.S. Secretary of Commerce under Herbert Hoover. So, but the house apparently was haunted from the start. The Lamonts apparently disregarded the whispers amongst the wait staff of strange noises and events, and then one night, Lamont fired 2 shots at what he thought was an intruder, only to discover that no one was there.
Dun, dun, dun.
He saw someone up there. Well, first off, I'd be like, I'm really glad I wasn't a servant in that guy's house, because he apparently had servants. Just like shot a gun in the middle of the night, and then once he found there was no one there, the Lamont family left the house immediately, and all of the belongings that they had brought up there that night, and never returned. Just like they were out. They were out, and the house had a number of like owners, including apparently Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw, who bought the place in the 1970s. For 6 months, the couple and their 4 children endured all manner of psychic phenomenon. I'd like the Journal-Sentinel to define that, but including fleeting shadows, whispering voices, random pockets of chilled air. I question the random pockets of chilled air, because if you've ever been in any structure in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, a random pocket of chilled air is like normal. But random pockets and objects that move down their own, okay, that's not normal. If stuff's moving on its own, that's not normal. While they were living there, Arnold had a nervous breakdown, and Ginger attempted suicide, but didn't actually die. So that's why there's But sorry for not content warning that. And apparently they made it onto a 2005 Discovery Channel episode of A Haunting. The house almost was completely destroyed in 1988 because of a fire. Because it sat abandoned for years, and then effectively most of it's burned away. But some claim the place is a sort of beacon that inexplicably attracts supernatural beings and events. And it's private land. You're not supposed to go there, but of course people do all the freaking time. Like there's there's a guy who owned the house for a while, who wrote a book, who claimed that it was haunted by 18th century explorer Jonathan Carver. But like the house was unoccupied for long periods of time. Like, and the guy who wrote the book like didn't actually like live in the mansion when he owned it. He like would like he never spent the night of it, and like would stay in a trailer on the property because he was so scared. This guy Raymond Bober, who owned the property for a while, like would like he just would not sleep in the house at night. Just like slept in a trailer outside.
Just that scared. Okay. All right. I mean, if you're comfortable in a trailer, but why would you have the property if you weren't comfortable? I
don't know if you've ever been up to northern Wisconsin, but a nice lake house is pretty great. So you can't sleep in it,
Okay.
It's beautiful lake house, beautiful spot on the lake, go fishing, spend the day, nice kitchen, and then you go sleep in the trailer.
All right.
It's dark in the trailer.
All right. I mean, if you're okay with that, that's fine. I would just suffer.
I'll risk it with the black bear and the deer.
No, the deer would be your problem more than mine.
Well,
But
if you go to Vilas County, there are deer like I live near a lot of deer where I am in Eau Claire, but Vilas County is like deer central. Like there are, it was just comical. Like I would just be like, I wonder if I could go see a deer. 5 minutes later, I find a deer. But it's just because, like, if you're up in it's the Northwoods. It's where the deer are. It's like being shocked that you see people in a city,
Yeah. Well, I mean, people get confused by any kind of wildlife anywhere where people live. I guess they feel like they should all be scared.
Well, like, it's also, that's how you can tell city people versus people who live in more rural areas, because like I grew up in the city. I know what that city person experienced of like, oh my God, deer are so pretty and they're so graceful. It was so amazing. Like I just walking through the woods and there was this deer and it turned and it looked at me and oh my God. And then like 3 deer ran right around us. And I'm like, now.
And I felt so at one with nature. And I think that the goddess is speaking to me.
It's Artemis sending a message. Artemis is sending me a personal message, because what are the odds that I, standing in the middle of the forest, would happen to see a deer, even though like all the predators have been killed, and so there's a massive overpopulation on the eastern half of the United States. But what are the odds that I happened to see one when I went to where the deer live?
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah,
I went to the ocean and I saw a fish.
Right.
What are the odds?
Right. I was like standing by the lake and I looked down at the pier and there was a minnow.
Oh, wow. So rare.
Yeah. It's like I get people who are like, oh, it's not deer. I'm like, first off, if I saw a creepy looking deer, I'd assume it was chronic wasting disease. But secondly, it's not a not deer. It's a big dumb asshole. It's deer are big dumb assholes, and that's like you walking alone in the night in the woods and you feel like you're being watched. It's a deer. It's a deer. Or it's a ghost. You can't tell. Wait till it tugs on your shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then tell it to buzz off.
No, it's 2 nights ago. I was like literally walking, doing a walk at night, and it was like darker than normal because it was the moon hadn't come up yet, and it had the ground was wet, and so like I was walking along the trail, like I often see deer on my walks at night, but like usually in the part where I'm in the woods. I'm at this part where I'm like suburban street. I'm walking on a path next to a soccer field, and I see this figure in the dark up ahead, and like the ground's reflective because like the sprinklers had been on earlier, so it's all wet and slick and it's dark, and I'm like, I just stop and I'm like, is there a person there? And then I was like, that's a fucking deer. And literally 2 inches off the side of the path, and like if I hadn't stopped, I would have been right on it. And I just like yelled at it, and like it gets up, and like it's clearly a deer, and it runs right in front of me, and I'm like, fucking deer. There's one thing that deer have in common with ghosts in that situation, though. If you yell at it, it'll go away. Yell at it, and it'll go away. If it's a bear, maybe not the best thing to do. Don't do that. Don't yell at a bear.
That's why you carry bear spray.
So okay, like my favorite thing is Wisconsin cryptids that are clearly bears. Like there is this legend about this like black panther in Eau Claire that I've found on this like cryptid website, and I'd never heard of this before. And like it was like a nurse driving home from Sacred Heart Hospital, like saw this thing, and it was like long. First she thought it was a big dog, and then like as she grew closer, it was clearly black, and then it reared up on its hind legs, and like it must have been it's a black bear. How do I know this? First off, I live down the street from Sacred Heart Hospital. The road she's talking about driving down is in my neighborhood. You know what I've also had in my neighborhood? I've had a cop tell me I had to cross the street because there was a bear in that tree. I walk loudly at certain parts of my walk at night to make sure that in case so a bear can hear me coming and avoid me. Like the bears come into town certain times a year. Like especially in the spring. In the spring, the bears come into town all the time. You know what looks like a large dog from a distance and is black? A black bear. It's like it's like occasionally a mountain lion wanders across Wisconsin. It happens, but they are not black. The mountain lions that we get, the twice a year that a DNR like gets a report of, like the 1 to 2 times a year the DNR gets a report of like a mountain lion, it's tan. Like it's the standard, like we don't have big black cats here. But it's clearly a freaking bear. Like there is a cryptid story so famous out of Wisconsin that the Asylum made a horror movie about it called The Beast of Bray Road. And it's the supposed Wisconsin werewolf. And God, where is this? It's like in Walworth County, is that where that is? Let me like it's
Ohio has that too.
Walworth County, Wisconsin. Like the story of like it's this big figure, and then it stood up on its, then stood upright like a person, and like I'm like, so a bear? It's a bear. The werewolf you're talking about it's a black bear. It's the relative size and shape of a black bear. Like, I understand that, like, you know, cryptids are exciting and neat. I love cryptids. That's why I look into them. That's why I know that the Beast of Bray Road exists. But every story I read about it, I'm like, so it's a bear?
It's a bear.
We have black bears in Wisconsin, guys.
So we have that problem here too, actually, in Ohio. Up in the northern part near up near Cedar Point, Sandusky area, there's werewolves apparently. I'm 90% sure it's bears.
Yeah.
So that's a problem here. I feel like city people just have never seen a bear. And part of the problem is that when they, like, you know, when they're just done hibernating, they don't look like fat, round bears that we're used to seeing on the nature shows. So they look kind of weirdly like people.
Yeah.
But it's a bear.
It's a bear.
The other one, and I'm actually going to this park later today for a lesbian cookout, so that's going to be fun. So, in High Bank Park in Polaris, Ohio, which is yet another suburb of Columbus, there is the Sasquatch. And I'm like, how is there a Sasquatch? It's a metro park. Metro means city. Someone had, like, it has to be documented that there is a Sasquatch here. It is easily the biggest park in the area. Yeah. But it's definitely a case of city people seeing a big park that they think is largely unexplored or untamed and thinking it's the wilderness, and seeing something tall and moving at a fast pace through the woods and thinking it must be a Sasquatch. But you know what it is? It is not a bear. It's a deer. It's always a fucking deer.
Yeah.
Learn what a deer and a bear looks like, and then you will have no cryptids ever.
Well, my favorite. Well, you know, I don't know if I've ever told you about my favorite cryptid, and that's the Crawfordsville monster.
Please tell me it's a deer.
No, it's better. So Crawfordsville, Indiana. It's about 45 minutes south of Lafayette. I've actually been to Crawfordsville a lot.
I feel like I know this one.
But I posted about it on Tumblr at one point years ago. That this is September of 1891. The Crawfordsville Journal, like, there's reported that, like, so these two ice delivery men cited a quote unquote strange phenomenon that hovered above them in their location and described it as a horrible apparition that filled them with dread. And a similar, like a Methodist pastor and his wife also, like, spotted this thing, and it was described as, quote, about 18 feet long and 8 feet wide, moved rapidly through the air by means of several pairs of side fins. It was pure white and had no definite shape or form, resembling somewhat a great white shroud fitted with propelling. It was pretty much this big white amorphous blob moving through the air. There was no tail or head visible, but there was one great flaming eye, and a sort of wheezing plaintive sound was emitted from the mouth, which was invisible. So it emitted from a mouth that they couldn't see a mouth, but it made a noise, so they assumed it was coming out of a mouth. But it was this big, effectively amorphous white blob that was moving through the air, and sometimes people thought they saw an eye. It flapped like a flag in the winds as it came on, and frequently gave a great squirm as though suffering unutterable agony. I love the
unutterable agony.
Yeah, the text, like the flavor text there. And some claiming they could, and like hundreds of residents observed the phenomenon the following evening, and some claimed they could feel the monster's quote-unquote hot breath as it swooped over them. Do you want to know what's really fun is that Crawfordsville, Indiana had just gotten electric streetlights installed.
Oh, God.
And what everyone's pretty sure this was is a flock of killdeer, the bird.
Oh my God, really?
Yes, it was a flock of birds that was confused by the streetlights. And so they were swarming the streetlights. That big flaming eye is the streetlight shining through the huge gathering of birds.
Oh my God.
It's the birds were confused because, like, you have to remember that, like, there hadn't been lights at night. And so local animals had never existed with that. Like, the modernizations we do have an effect on it. So this whole, like, giant phantom monster that haunted Crawfordsville was a flock of small birds.
You can't hear it, but my girlfriend is just cracking up over here by the way you said flock of small birds. Unutterable agony from a flock of small birds.
Yeah. So, like, that's why, like, look, I love cryptids. I love cryptid stories, but I kind of love them when they're like this, where it's something that, like, it's just so ridiculous.
Silly. There's a couple in Ohio. I told you about the werewolves, and I've told you about the High Bank Park Sasquatch. The one I still don't have an explanation for is the Frogmen of Loveland, and that's in the Cincinnati area, who have been spotted twice. And I'm wondering if you can offer some suggestions on what they might be.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So there is a bridge out by out by Loveland. It's a long road, and there's a creek underneath it. And they only appear late at night, and there's been 2 sightings so far that have been, like, documented as, the raving madman says, as opposed to, I thought I got high and saw it. There's a difference there. So, the 2 ones that I've heard of that are, like, documented, they were driving down the road. One guy got flat, and as he was fixing his flat, a man climbed out of the creek on the other side of the road, and he looked like a frog, and then he blinked and he disappeared. So that's the one. The other one is a little bit less believable, because I'm wondering if he was on something, like if they hadn't perfected edibles yet or something, because it was, once again, frogmen or lizard men. We're not sure, but like the lingo is usually frogmen.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page while we're talking about this.
Yeah. On the side of the road, there was 3 frogmen. They looked like if they were a man or a frog, both at the same time, wearing wizard hats and casting spells in a circle by the road. I'm not
Is there a college in Loveland, Ohio?
I don't know. There might be. Are you saying they didn't perfect edibles yet?
Well, I'm also saying, so looking at the Loveland frog, so besides the actual sightings they have, In August 2016, local Cincinnati TV stations reported that, quote, a night of fun turned into a chilling tale of horror when two teenagers playing Pokemon Go between Loveland, Madeira Road, and Lake Isabella claimed to see a giant frog near the lake on August 3rd that stood up and walked on its hind legs. It was later revealed to be a local student from Archbishop Moeller High School in a homemade frog costume.
I need pictures.
So I don't know. Like there's a citation, but it's to a text articles. I don't have photos, but so I mean, like there are genuine sightings, and then there's that sighting separately.
Yeah, but
so
the wizard frog people is from like 1900s, fairly early on, I think.
Yeah, you don't. But here's the thing: you don't think that like teenagers haven't been teenagers this whole time?
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe it was just an elaborate prank, like somebody started it and then they just kept going. You know, I mean, It could be just the same. Like, this is not a bear, and it is not a deer, and it is not a flock of killdeer in a streetlight, which is, by the way, the most ridiculous cryptid that I've ever.
That's my favorite cryptid. It's I'm from Wisconsin. I spend a lot of time in Rhinelander. I love the hodag, but the Crawfordsville monster beats the hodag every day because the hodag was just a hoax. The Crawfordsville monster is people being real dumb.
Yeah. So I am wondering if like the Loveland Frogmen is once again a hoax, like the hodag.
I mean, who knows? Like it depends on whether or not someone actually saw something. You know,
I mean,
and there's always a chance that it's a genuine person seeing someone doing something fake.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, because it could be real, but there's like a whole thing about it. If you actually go down to the Cincinnati area, they laugh about it mostly. I still don't know if it's confirmed about to be anything. It could very well just have been a dude in a rubber mask, which honestly, I think maybe he's This seems like a Scooby-Doo scenario.
Well, I think that one of the interesting things, and it's apparently we're talking more about like folklore and how stories happen this year, which I think is nice because it's different than what we've talked about in previous episodes for Halloween. But like the folklore behind stories and local folklore and how it evolves, like it's like we've talked about it with like ghost explanations where people want a narrative about a ghost. We see this in like cryptid stories, and like people want this tale. But like you see this all over the place, I always wonder like who was the first person who told the story and passed it on, and like in these fake like take the Fritz Fitzsimmons like thing from my high school, like who was the first person who invented this story to go along with it? Was it one person? Did one person add one detail and then someone took that and then added another detail? And like, was this cumulative? Because like you get stuff like in Wisconsin, there's this really weird story called Hauntedville.
Okay.
And it's what's super weird is that it's part of a pattern of like stories about like towns were purely inhabited by little people, like people who with dwarfism.
Mm-hmm.
And like you see legends about towns like that, and they almost always turn out to be not real. Like there's like some truth to a couple of them, but for the most part they were never real as places that people lived. But Hauntedville is a particular one, like near Muskego, Wisconsin. It's like south it's outside the Milwaukee area. Like I think it's Waukesha County. Which it's and it's like, so this legend of a conclave of little people whose homes were supposedly built to scale in the woods, and apparently also in this village there's supposed to be like one regular sized person, an old albino man who serves as the protector, and that if trespassers are cows, the unruly dwarves will cut their legs from the knees down, so they are forced to live like one of them. And that's why it's called Hauntedville.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
I get it.
there are all of these legends like about it, like there are legends about them being circus dwarves who revolted against their ringleader, and then some, really awful details that I'm not going to
Really,
repeat in that
really
story, that
awful.
you can go look up the Wikipedia page if you want. And we actually did, like, on the Nerd and Tie Network, Poor Man's History did an episode about Hauntedville. And like there's like people, like there's this one writer who thinks he found the inspiration for the thing when he found like a ruined place in the woods on private land, but like there's no evidence that anything ever existed, right? That it was like, and people like making up stories at a nearby college, like really, like is really where, like, but no one knows where this legend really started with. It just started getting passed everywhere. Like it made it into, Garth Ennis put it into like 2 issues, like used it as the base of like 2 issues of The Punisher in 2002. Like,
Wow. That is such a specific story. Like it's very, like all those details, like all of those details work together to make this absolutely ridiculous story.
But like,
and
but people go driving around like the area looking for Hauntedville, like to the point where like now there's development happening there, like where like subdivisions are being built out there, and so like it's becoming even a bigger problem. Where like, but like local cops are like, we've never heard of this like Hauntedville thing. We have heard of idiots trying to trespass on other people's land looking for it.
We have that problem with the with Helltown, and I think I told you about Helltown at the last Ghost Stories episode of
I do not remember.
So this is up in Cuyahoga. Cuyahoga is one of the national parks. Yeah.
Sorry, now it just all came back to me.
The flaming bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, the short version of this is there used to be a mill town, and the mill town, like, there was no longer any need for the mill. The steel mill closed. So the town picked up and they moved. So there's a handful of ruins in there, but even though the people who used to live there moved to the next town over, and there are descendants of the original people of that mill town living there who can tell you that no, we all just moved, literally, it's okay. And then they turned it into part of the park. People started rumors that the town was set on fire, and then later, as we got into the satanic panic in the 80s and 90s, there were satanic nuns who took children from the nearby town on a school bus and set it aflame as a sacrifice to Satan. And you can see the bus there. There's a school bus there because there's a decommissioned school bus, and it is currently being eaten by the trees as nature takes over. That's the story of the bus, is just decommissioned, and they took it there.
Yeah.
And, if you go to the nearby town that all of the descendants are from, or like where all the descendants of this mill town ended up, they will call that the new hell town. If you ask some of these urban exploration people, and they will be taking pictures of like the architecture and like circling and highlighting the upside down crosses in the molding and things like that. And it's like, why there are upside down crosses and everything? Because that is a strong structure for architecture. It's not satanic, and also that is the sign of St. Peter. But we don't talk about Helltown in the UrbX Facebook group because people are so ridiculous about it. Like the story just kept compiling and compounding and becoming this absolutely ridiculous, implausible story that anybody with even a remote interest in Satanism would tell you, this is the fakest shit.
Yeah.
That's the summation of what happened in Cuyahoga.
Well, I mean, like, my favorite thing are, like, some of the more ridiculous hauntings. Like, there's this restaurant in Clarendon Hills, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago called the Country House. And it's a good, I like the food there. Like, food's good. I had a good meal when I ate there. But, like, the haunted restaurant thing is just so common. A story you hear. And, like there's a haunted music venue here slash bar in the town I live in. My favorite thing about the Country House is like lots of parts of the place are supposed to be haunted, right? Like the jukebox turning itself on in the middle of the night, things like that. Supposedly,
That's not a wild idea.
You know, but one of my favorites is, and like the shutters are supposedly open and closed as if they have a mind of their own. But my favorite thing is that, like, what I heard, and I don't know how true this is, but apparently the women's restroom is haunted.
Always the women's. It's never the men's. There's a couple of restaurants in Columbus that are like that, and it's always the women's restroom that's haunted.
Well, you know, and you know what though? Like you talked to Brina Guerin, who hosts X Positive. We've had I've had her on the show a couple of times for the Ghost Stories episodes in the last couple of years, and she literally the women's restroom at her job, she has literally had a paranormal experience in.
I'm telling you, it's just women's restrooms.
I think maybe it just has to do with the fact that it takes longer, so you spend more time in there. So maybe,
I mean, if you're doing your makeup, yeah.
I mean, just, you know, look, the urinal, look, I'm a non-binary person, but I will be using the men's room because the urinal, you are in and out in under 2 minutes. You know, you can pee and wash your hands and dry your hands and get out of there in under 2 minutes. Like, boom, you're done.
Maybe it's also, you know, maybe
they can service more people at once, because in the space you can put like 3 stalls, you can put like 8 urinals.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the line. As a person who has been at plenty of concert venues where I have seen women sneak into the men's rooms to use the toilets in the men's room, like, it is. That's always my favorite thing is like when trans men are using a men's room at something, and suddenly women come in and they suddenly think they've gone into like the wrong bathroom, and it's like, no, there's just a line at the other bathroom, and you are in the one without one.
Yeah, I just had an image of like being haunted while there is a line of men at the urinals, so I'm just kind of like, maybe that's a scene in a movie somewhere that I'm going to direct one day. Next on Ghostbusters.
I'm just like, you don't have time to notice the ghost. You're in and out.
Yeah, gotta go. Bye. Arguably, cis women do spend more time in the bathroom. You know, the mirrors are usually bigger, and, you know, mirrors being portals to the other world or something. They probably don't.
A lot of guys don't wash their hands, so they aren't even by the mirrors.
Yeah. There you go.
I wish I wasn't joking. People, please wash your hands after you use the bathroom.
Please wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. Please wash your hands.
I have witnessed so many men not wash their hands.
And they just don't care.
They don't.
They simply don't.
No.
No. But yeah, there's quite a few restaurants in Columbus. Well, one of the things I've always noticed is that there's always like a tunnel somewhere, like that the dark shadowy figure like escapes to, and then you can't follow them. Yeah. And it's like, why are there so many tunnels? Why did you build so many tunnels in your city? I don't understand.
Well, sometimes nuclear fallout shelters, and then sometimes steam.
I know Cincinnati definitely has the they tried to do a subway.
Oh, I love that. The abandoned. Yeah, I love that abandoned subway.
That's on my to-do list. That's on my to-do list. There's the abandoned subway rails in Cincinnati that are definitely real.
Yeah, I've seen YouTube videos. So yes.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And then there's Hell's Gate in Columbus over by the Spaghetti Factory. which makes it sound less scary. And it's actually not haunted. It's just a really neat place. A lot of people go there to practice graffiti, and it makes it great for photo shoots. It's a giant storm drain, but it's big enough that a grown man can fit into it. So, it looks really cool. So, I mean, there are tunnels. I'm not saying there aren't tunnels, but it always seems like the tunnels and the ghosts are super conveniently placed next to each other. So I'm wondering if maybe we're just into another Scooby-Doo situation, and there's like some unclaimed real estate and a will to something, and some dude in a rubber mask. And
I do think that there is something to be said that places where people can hide and things can happen unseen are more likely to have bad things happen in them.
That is fair.
And so there's a combination of things. First off, like, we have an instinctive fear response. And so we're going to be heightened in our observation in those moments. But secondly, if we go for like the more like bad energy, bad things happen there, therefore there's more likely to be something negative there sitting in that space, whether it be a ghost of something that happened there or something drawn to that energy. That is like, so there, it's the park, the Owen Park. I don't think I've told this story ever on this podcast, because I was with someone who I prefer to pretend never existed in my life. Everyone's allowed one coma, and this is mine. The relationship where like, oh, I didn't date that person. I was in a coma for those 3 months. I couldn't have been dating anyone. This person was my coma. Like,
okay, all right, get it out.
Worse than but anyway, so we were taking a walk one night, and we were just walking down by this park, and so the from the university there's kind of a path that goes underneath a bridge. To the other side is the park, and we were just taking a walk along the river, and I don't think I had the clear, distinct voice in my ear ghost encounter at this point, so I hadn't experienced that yet. So like I hadn't had the thing that would say I'm never going to this park alone at night again happen. So we were walking, and like I just suddenly, like, it wasn't, I usually don't talk about this as a ghost story because I didn't see anything. It's like as we were approaching the path that would, like, it dipped under the road bridge and then would come back out in the park, I just had this sudden need to not go there. Right? Like, that's why I don't tell this as a ghost story, because maybe it was just me being instinctively like going, don't go there. You could get murdered there. Right. But like, it was just suddenly this, like, if it weren't for the other, like, more supernatural things I had in that place, like, I would, just dismiss it as my own brain. But like, it was just suddenly something doesn't want me to go under that bridge. Why don't we turn around and go this other way in this very well lit area? Like, it was just every hair on the back of my neck was standing up. And it was, but it was a dark path under a bridge. It was, and yeah, there was definitely a vibe.
Yeah.
And so that's why my thought with like tunnels and things like that, dark tunnels, things like, it's like that is where bad things happen to people.
Not safe, unsafe.
Yeah.
Not safe for work.
If you feel like that dark alley is spooky, it might just actually be very dangerous.
Yeah. But I mean, it is also, usually if a dark alley is spooky and dangerous, it's probably because something dangerous has happened there.
Right, exactly. Like, that's the place where bad things happen.
We have a fear response related to these dark, narrow places where there's no, like, where there seems to be no escape. We have a fear response to that for a very good reason. That's because for dangerous things happen. So I definitely understand that. And to kind of segue into the story I did have that my friend Lexi told me this past week, opposite of the dark not opposite of dark, but opposite of the tight places where there's no escape, is highways at night at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So she was telling me that she and her best friend were driving through a field, like on the highway, on a field, West Virginia, There was no one on the road, there was no one behind them, and there were no houses for miles. Like miles and miles. Couldn't see like a single, there was no street lights. It was just completely farmland and like maybe a dotting of houses by the mountains.
There might be a farmhouse off in the distance, but it's not near the road and its lights aren't on.
Definitely not in walking distance.
It's 3 a.m. They're asleep because they're getting up at 4 for the cows or whatever animals they might have. I'm from Wisconsin. My brain goes to cows.
I know you'd be right. I mean, I don't know what it is in West Virginia, but probably also cows. So they're driving 3 a.m. in the dark, and she's the driver. She sees a man walking with his son, or, a man walking with a small boy.
Yeah.
And she's like, where are they from? Do they need help? Are they stranded? So she slows down to, see if they need any kind of help, which is all, by the way, a dangerous thing to do on a highway in the middle of nowhere. She slows down and they kind of disappear. And as she's looking at them, or as she's looking away to talk to her friend Sarah, like, you saw them, right? And, verify, yeah, we saw them, but I don't know where they went. In front of the car, great big buck, a white deer in the middle of the road. She stops the car. She's like, okay, really weird. We're just going to let him pass. He doesn't pass. He starts charging the car.
Oh, God, I hate when deer do that.
Yeah. I mean, with your average deer, that's a fear response for them.
Yep, bucks especially will charge your cars.
Yeah. So he charges the car, and she braces for impact, and impact never happens. Look up, deer is gone. Deer is missing. There is no deer. Sarah in the passenger seat says, something just touched me. Something is on me. She gets up, she gets out of the car. They, try to pat her down, and there's this gigantic beetle all crawling across her arm and like all around her neck and shoulders. But they had not left the car in several hours. So where would this beetle have come from? So she finds out where it is, and she tries to smack it, and it's gone again. It's like, what is happening? So then that's when they said, we need to get off of this highway as soon as possible. And, they drove very, very fast to get out of this field, find the nearest town, and said, we are not coming back. That's a scary place.
Yeah. And for the record, if someone on the internet wants to actually talk to me about not deer, that would count. That is the first thing I've heard that I would count as a not deer.
That was definitely a not deer.
That was definitely not a deer. Ooh, that is, or at least the ghost of a deer. Like I could understand maybe mistaking the deer for the man and child, because they have 4 legs, and they have a tall element, and they have a with like tall element being the antlers, short element being the rump and all that. I can understand that. I can't understand like it charging and then disappearing, because if a deer charges you, it's in it. It's gonna. Oh yeah, no, and I've had a deer charge towards me and then swerve at the last moment. Well, I swerved out of the way and it like didn't hit me. But if you're in a stationary vehicle, that seems highly unlikely. I mean, like, but also if it's you would like here, I can come up with like rational explanations for parts of this, but like all of it together. But all of it together is strange. Well, but also like I find it really hard to mistake. Like here, a deer showing up and charging at the car, and then changing course last second and not hitting the car and running off into the darkness. I can rationalize that. But I don't like. I have a problem actually seeing the man and the boy at like that the deer was the man and the boy, because that's not. It's just very different shapes.
Like you'd have to be it. Like I can almost see it in the sense like it's 3 a.m. You're probably tired. You're not seeing things correctly.
Like I can see mistaking a deer for a person if the deer is head on. Like I literally did that the other night. right? Like
Yeah.
it's like my first instinct was person, and then I was like, no, that's a deer. But it was that deer was like head on facing me. It was also a doe, so it didn't have antlers, but
Wow.
um like it was like that deer facing me head on. I can see that, but it's like the way like a man, like two humans walking side by side is not a way that like a deer moves.
Yeah. So like this story scared the crap out of me because like so this is I love the people that I work with because I can talk about ghosts with the exception of one dude, and I don't like that dude anyway, so I just try not to talk to him. But with the exception of him, I can talk to any of the people I work with about ghosts and they'll pretty much understand.
Yeah.
She said she made the distinction that like we were talking about ghosts and then she got the vibe that I understood and she said, so they're not actually ghosts that typically follow me. They are what I would consider demons. And I'm like, now it all makes sense. Because that didn't sound like a ghost. It sounded like a not deer.
Yeah.
And that's like I am a little bit like freaked out.
It's that the friend of the car also seeing it. That was like that is such a mood. Like there's always that moment where like you're in a thing and like you're with other people and there's the first person like you see something and then someone else says, "Did you just see that?" Or like,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh God, I was hoping I was hallucinating. Like, I have a couple of
Yeah.
like moments like that in my life where like we saw, like I was standing in the street outside my friend's house, on like a dead end street, and we were literally at the end of the dead end street where he lived. So like we were technically standing in the street, but the only thing we were blocking was his driveway. But my car was parked on the street, and we saw what looked like a translucent figure run out from between two houses and run behind my car. And
I think you told me about that last one. Yeah.
I probably did. And like, but like it again, it wasn't that scary an experience. Like we chased it away and we all saw it go somewhere. Like that's the thing is it's like there are three adult people standing there and we all saw the thing. And it was like, oh crap, this is happening. Because, it's like, if I just saw that, I would just assume that I was seeing things.
Like it was an eye floater or something.
Yeah, or like I turned my head and my brain like saw like an eyelash and interpreted that as a person's shape or something. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But this is, two other people, and one of them describes it to you, and they describe what you saw before you say it out loud. That is always the great. Like it makes you
feel a little bit. I mean, it's a little bittersweet because you kind of want to have not seen that.
Right? No, exactly. Like I
but
don't
at least
want
you're not
the ghost. Well, Yeah.
Like I don't want to see a ghost, but if I see a ghost, I'd prefer it if I wasn't the only person who saw it.
Well, it's like I know that like a couple of years ago, my wife, in the apartment we're living in now, was just like, my place is pretty well warded because my goal is to never have a ghost in my home again. That is my goal. I lived with one for 3 years, not again. Spotted enough stuff in my old dorm, not again. Not going to live in a place with a ghost. And since I rent, it's always a risk, and so I ward the crap out of my place. But like, couple of years ago, like one morning we're like getting ready to like I'm gonna drive my wife to work, and she goes, that's funny, like I just saw something move out of the corner of my eye, and but the place is worded, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, there's no ghosts here. And then I drove her to work, and then when I got home I was like, okay, rebuilding all the words from scratch just to be safe. Nope. Not playing this game. Not just not dealing with that today. It's probably nothing. Well, it's because I suffer from sleep paralysis sometimes, and I have had hallucinations from sleep paralysis, and like that's why like with ghost stories, it's like I've also seen things that my brain would normally interpret as a ghost if I was fully awake, but I know they're not because I know that I'm in a heightened state that is attached to REM sleep, and hallucinations are one of the things that can happen
during it, where like I literally one night woke up in the middle of the night with sleep paralysis, and at the end of my bed saw the bent neck lady from Haunting of Hill House.
Jesus. Oh.
But like exactly the bent neck lady from Haunting of Hill House, which I had just watched a week before, and I just went, I just was like, it immediately snapped me out of my fear, because I'm like, that's from a TV show. That is not, no. That was not, like, anything else would spook me right now, but I have sleep paralysis. I have hallucinated things before in this state. That is from a TV show. Brain, I am disappointed in you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's like, I am definitely disappointed in my brain. Like, that is...
Like, you could do something original.
Right. You are capable of far scarier stuff than a thing from a TV show.
Your brain just phoned it in that day.
Trae, you think you're a writer. Come up with original stuff.
Hey, we all have our own lazy days.
My terrors should be original. New content.
I'm getting tired of these streaming services. Nothing new.
It was a remake even that you took that from.
See, I have not actually seen the remake. I've only seen the original, so I'm thinking the original.
Oh no,
like...
it's like, well, the funny thing is that the bent neck lady is specifically connected to a character in Haunting of Hill House who has sleep paralysis.
Your brain is doing a thing. That's adorable.
Yeah, I was like so mad. I'm like, but it took what should be like an absolutely horrifying experience to have a clear and vivid hallucination of a terrifying ghost, and just have it be like, that's from TV. Like, just all fear just completely broken in that moment. Like, I'm in an incredibly warded room because I ward my bedroom even more than I ward the rest of my home. Like,
that's where you sleep.
Yeah, this is the one place I have multiple protective things all around this room and around my bed. The one place where there won't be a ghost in my home is that room. It is like, no, I have sleep paralysis though. Sleep paralysis is usually just a pain in the ass when it happens, but occasionally it involves vivid hallucinations of fear. So.
You're just occasionally scared shitless. It's okay. It's normal.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Well, the first time I had a vivid hallucination after sleep paralysis, I had a dream where I was, and this happened while I was living in a house that was haunted. That's how, like, I'm like, that's not the ghost. This is my own sleep paralysis. Because I knew about sleep paralysis long before I started experiencing it. But I had a dream where I was in a fist fight with a guy. And which is not a normal thing for my life. But I woke up and he was sitting on my chest trying to choke me. But while I didn't feel the hands on my neck, I felt the weight of him sitting on my chest. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like he was translucent. But I was like, this is classic sleep paralysis hallucination. This is literally like where like the nightmare, like the thing sitting on your chest. And I'm like, because you feel the weight from the sleep paralysis. And I was like, it's
classic.
Like the number of times, there have been times where I've woken up in a panic, but it's ironically the more vivid the hallucination in those moments, the less likely I am to remain scared, because I thankfully read up on sleep paralysis years before I ever had it happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, there's something sitting on my chest. I can't move. I feel, okay, yeah, no, well, also, I'm so used to fear because I have generalized anxiety disorder. So, I know panic. I can get out of panic fast. I mean, because it's going to come on any moment. So it's managing in those situations. Okay, I'm having a fear response. I feel the weight. I can't move. Then, of course, the hallucination, immediately, dissipate, faded, and, but, I'm like, this is the room that I used to hear a snoring sound on the other side of my bedroom when I was the only one in the apartment. I know that, I believe in ghosts. This room is haunted. The thing that tried to kill me was my brain.
Oh, hooray. Listen. Listen. If your brain is trying to kill you, that means you just have to beat up your brain.
Oh,
That's
exactly.
it.
Or you just tell it to go
Tell
away.
the bent neck lady. Tell the bent neck lady that she can find somebody else to haunt because you are already booked.
Yeah. And also, I don't have the budget to pay for that actress.
Are you kidding me? That's got to be thousands of dollars per hour.
Right. No, I'm not. That was a vastly popular Netflix streaming series. I'm not gonna.
See, this is why they're going on strike.
Exactly, because they're being forced to work these extra hours where they're appearing in people's sleep paralysis hallucinations. It's just not a good economic situation.
I bet they're not even getting paid for that. I bet
No,
they're
100% not. And there was really good lighting too, because it was a dark room, but she was really well lit. So, whoever the crew members were who did that, like, they weren't getting TV rate.
There's no way.
Oh. So we eventually got around to spooky things. I'm going to have to... Thankfully, I record the intros after we record the episode, so I can set this up appropriately to build expectations for what we're going to talk about. So we're good.
Fabulous.
Yeah. It's. I want to thank you so... I think that's enough, though, as this has gotten to be a very long episode. So I want to thank you, Lee, for coming on to the show. Is there anything you want to plug while you're here?
Well, all of the projects I'm working on are kind of in like the ideas and outlining phase, so I don't have titles for anything yet. But if you want to follow me on Tumblr, I'm Libra Ford. That's Libra like the sign and Ford like the truck. And I mostly post pictures of my adventures out in the world and rant about working as a photographer, because now I'm a photographer and not a florist, and it's so much better.
And
that's it. And
people can still find the Sweeney Tarot, the tarot deck you designed, available online?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can find links to it on, it has its own Tumblr. It's the Sweeney Tarot at Tumblr, and there's also, it's on GameCrafter if you search the Sweeney Tarot. You can find it there as well for purchase, and the guidebook is on Amazon.
Okay, and of course you've also written several books like Good Clean Dirt and The Glue Famine.
Yeah. Yeah, well dang, man, prompting me.
Come on, you do need stuff. People need to see it.
Okay, yeah. Good Clean Dirt is my baby. That's basically the Flower Shop AU for all the characters that currently exist in my head.
Which you wrote before working in a flower shop.
I did write it before working in the flower shop, and I'm surprised to say that I was actually entirely correct, except for the part about pretending to be a god and also counterfeit dollar bills, which happened much less often than they did in the book, but that's also the plot. So there's that. There's the Glue Famine, which is about my adventures working at a craft store during the height of the slime fad, where I had to teach the classes every week. So if you like to be entertained and also feel find something relatable about the horrors of working in retail, that's your bag. And it's illustrated.
Yes, because you're also a very good artist. By my standards.
I try to be.
Which means you're better than I am.
Okay, and my art Tumblr is Cannibal Coalition.
Cannibal Coalition. I want to make sure we say it clearly, because it sounded like you said Campbell for a moment, and that's
Cannibal Coalition? No, it's like eating people.
Eating people,
but more
not
than
soup.
One. Yeah, eat people, not soup, and then like there's more than one cannibal, so it's a coalition of them.
Yes. All right. I think that's where we're going to wrap it. Now I'm going to head into the outro for future Trae to take it away from here.
Thank you guys so much for joining me for yet another month of the BS Free Witchcraft podcast. I've, of course, have been Trae Dorn, And I want to start up by giving a special shout out to listeners Stephanie Grave, Mary Stowell, Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, and Amber Schmidt. Remember, this show is brought to you by Patreon contributions from listeners like them and like you. If you want to contribute to my Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. And remember, even contributing just $1 a month gets you access to these episodes a whole week early. You could have listened to this a week ago, unless you're listening to it on the Patreon feed, because it's the same version of the episode 90% of the time, and then you are doing the thing, and thanks. The Patreon helps me keep the lights on, but I understand times are tough. If you can't afford to contribute, that's cool. That's why the show is still free. You can support the show just by sharing it with your friends, telling everyone about it, and yeah, just tell your friends. And you can follow the show on social media. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/bsfreewitchcraft, and then you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/TRAEGORN. You can follow me on Tumblr at TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. And you can follow me on TikTok at the username Traegorn, TRAEGORN. I'm pretty easy to find across most of the internet. Remember that we are a part of the Nerd and Tie podcast network. We make a lot of great shows, and if you're looking for more witchy content, may I recommend our sibling podcast, Hex Positive, hosted by Brina Guerin, which is a bunch more witchcraft stuff, and you can find that at nerdandtie.com/hex. Or if you're looking for something a little different, consider checking out the actual play show, Stormwood and Associates, that I'm the primary GM on. It is a modern fantasy role-playing game using the super awesome Action Heroes role-playing system, not D&D. But you can find, we're wrapping up Campaign 1 right now, so the 130-something episodes of Campaign 1 are coming to a close, and you should check them out, because that show is pretty great, and I'm not just saying it because I'm part of it. Anyways, with that, Magicians, I will talk to you all again in a month, and stay safe, and don't throw stuff at people, I guess. I don't know. I never know how to end this. You know that about me already by now.